Society today suffers from the effects of a contraceptive mentality inherited from the sexual revolution of the 60s. It intended to free the woman from motherhood using new contraceptives, separating sexuality from love and procreation. This unnatural mentality is promoted and exploited by some multinationals, mass media, governments, and international organizations.
Il existe une expression qui est utilisée par les Nations Unies.
There is an expression widely used in the United Nations, which is sexual and reproductive health. But that expression hides a reality that is little known by the general public. It's the activity of organizations, such as, for example, International Planned Parenthood, as well as some agencies of the United Nations, that promote the right to abortion on one hand, and also the right to contraception at very young ages.
Dès le plus jeune âge.
I think it's a reality. There is a very big pressure from the companies that produces all these artificial family planning devices, the condoms, the pills, and everything. There's a big money, lobby money, to promote this so-called contraceptive mentality.
Sex education is usually a massive way for contraceptive indoctrination. Sweden was the first country in the world to make it compulsory in public schools in the 50s. What has been the result?
Je suis suédoise.
I'm Swedish. I grew up in Sweden. I went to public school in Sweden. At 14 years of age, they explained to us how we could turn to contraception, abortion, and all of that without our parents' knowledge. Today, we have one of the highest abortion rates among teens in Europe, despite the fact that contraception is free and available.
Alors même que l'accès à la contraception est libre et gratuit.
Trying to push the use of condom by the authorities from the age of 14 has led to a rise in juvenile promiscuity, a growing rate of unwanted pregnancy, and it's led to an increase in sexually transmitted infections, especially HPV, the human papillomavirus.
El virus del papiloma humano.
In places where they have very aggressive policies of giving out free condoms, very explicit sexual education in the schools, things like that, you actually end up with more out of wedlock pregnancies, more abortions, much higher rates of sexually transmitted diseases.
But despite their failure, the propaganda continues, insisting on practicing so-called safe sex.
So you tell them, oh, but you can have safe sex if you use a condom or if you are on the pill. Then they just do more of it, and they do so much more of it that then you end up with even more of the problem.
Typically taking the form of safe sex, and safe sex read as play with sex, but just protect yourself. What has happened with that, what do we know now, 20 years later, is that actually there is not such a thing as safe sex, that the STDs has grown immensely among teenagers, that this has affected their academic performance, their psychological stability, their productivity, and that has also increased the cost, the health cost for the government.
The truth is that the condom is a moderately unsafe contraceptive method, not just from the point of view of fertility, but also from the point of view of the transmission of infections, or specifically, the transmission of HIV.
The effects of contraceptives on health are clear.
Los anticonceptivos diarios.
Daily contraceptives have a very long list of side effects. They're going to appear when the woman has latent illnesses that perhaps she doesn't even know she has, a certain propensity for ectopic pregnancies, circulation problems, or some predisposition for breast cancer. If she suffers from epilepsy, tuberculosis, diabetes, we know that this isn't candy we're dealing with. We can't be frivolous.
O sea, que no podemos ser frívolos.
This list of side effects is endless. The most important side effects have to do with thrombi that originate in the deep venous system, especially in predisposed women. This is what's known as upper extremity deep vein thrombosis, which can cause a pulmonary embolism.
Puede dar una embolia pulmonar.
When it comes to contraceptive pills, I don't think it's a good method to use due to the toxicity it generates in the long term when the woman has consumed them over a certain number of months or even years.
En todos los casos,
There are side effects in every case. And with the IUD, the most common secondary effects, which aren't too frequent, thank God, are extrauterine pregnancy and tubal infection.
y la infección tubárica.
Contraceptive methods incur other serious consequences that don't appear on the box.
Existen unos efectos secundarios psicológicos.
Psychological side effects, because taking contraceptives in many cases diminishes a woman's sexual desire and also diminishes vaginal lubrication, which means sometimes they don't feel like having intercourse. In some cases, they can feel used. I feel like an object belonging to my partner, an object of my husband's in some cases.
De mi marido, en algún caso.
A woman takes the pill thinking she's going to be freed and her sexuality is going to be super spontaneous, super continuous, and super permanent. And then she becomes disinterested in sexual intercourse. Then what happens? Well, the woman really frees herself of the pill, frees herself of the condom, frees herself of the tools, and feels more loved by her husband.
But there's a very strong link between use of artificial contraception and increased divorce rates. Rate, at least in the US, among couples who don't use artificial contraception is somewhere below 2%. The divorce rate in the general population is over 50%. That's a huge, huge difference there. I think one of the reasons is precisely that having children deepens the bond of marriage and gives couples a greater reason to work things out when the relationship inevitably involves some difficulties, because there is no relationship that doesn't involve some difficulties.
Contraceptives get in the way of a full love between partners, propagate selfishness, and foment infidelity.
If it works with my wife, it can also work with another woman. So what I see with friends that use that is that they are not just using it with their spouses. So that gives people that false sense of security and now encourages them to be promiscuous.
Sterilization, either via vasectomy in the man or tubal ligation in the woman, has become commonplace. Many have suffered it, victims of ignorance, lies, and medical or media pressure. There are so many people who regret it.
My wife and I married very young, and at 23 we had 2 kids. And after that, we decided that I would have an operation, so we couldn't have any more children. With time, I became aware I had a conversion experience, that what I had done was an affront to my human dignity, throwing away a gift that God had given me. I give thanks to God that I was finally able to realize and to confess it, which is a very difficult thing. But how many people do the same kind of thing without realizing it?
From an ethical standpoint, contraceptives are immoral because they go against the very nature of human sexuality.
Because I think that using contraception is something like, I like you, but I don't like your fertility, or something like that, and something artificial in the life of family couple.
Their immorality reaches a peak when, in addition, the contraceptive has an abortive effect, putting end to a human life.
Well, again, I guess only one thing I think to recognize about some contraceptives, like the morning after pill or the week after pill or Ella or Plan B, is that many of them can sometimes act as abortifacients. That is, they can work not by preventing conception, but by killing an early human life before implantation, or even some of them shortly after implantation. So it's really, in many ways, many times it's an early abortion, even though the woman may never even know that she was pregnant.
The so-called morning after pill is a hormone bomb. It's really serious because we know that these hormonal compounds, in addition to impeding ovulation, They make modifications to the endometrium, which means that if ovulation has already taken place and the egg has been fertilized by a spermatozoid that has arrived at the right time, what we're impeding is an implantation, which means that at the moment of fertilization there is life, and if we keep it from attaching, we are killing a human being.
By producing, among other effects, chronic inflammation of the endometrium, the IUD can exert an abortive action as it impedes the implementation of the embryo to the uterus. In addition, it favors pelvic inflammatory diseases, the obstruction of the fallopian tubes, and permanent sterility. It's a sad fact that in China, the Soviet Union, and other former communist countries, abortion has been used as a regular method of birth control.
The rate of abortion in Macedonia was extremely high. Women would perform more than 3 abortions in their lifetime. Birth was mainly done by abortions or using preservatives. But I think having an abortion as a means of planning family is something that we should consider against the will of God, because for me that's when the life starts. I believe that abortion is a forced family planning and is actually against human nature.
The natural methods of fertility awareness are a completely different philosophy. They don't come from a contraceptive viewpoint. They strengthen the family and allow us to respect the natural order. Those who know it have no doubt.
My friends would tell me, so why did I start the contraception in the first place? If I can do without them. I said, because nobody told you contraception is not the right method.
So if they know how to do natural family planning, it will help the poor people to save themselves and not using the commodity. And also it can save them from HIV/AIDS too if they properly maintain this.
With artificial family planning, there are so many disadvantages in it. You can become obese, you can have high blood pressure and other related complications. So I will advise them to continue with God in natural family planning.
In the past, couples didn't know the natural methods very well. But today, it's much easier to learn these methods. In our times, we all have to spread the word that you can live a chaste life following the natural methods without turning to contraceptives.
The contraceptive methods are immoral, not so much for manipulating biological nature, but for injuring the personal dignity of love, the unity of the person, and the total reciprocal self-giving between partners. True love, without contraceptives, is possible. Not only is it natural, it's the true path to happiness.